Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Yeah. And I think let's see, what will we turn on first? I guess this. Alright, comment. And so it's going to be mostly two slit stuff. And yeah, be ready for that. Okay. I can see where you're coming from when it comes to kinetic energy. So he's getting that you've sort of been lied to about the credibility of the kinetic energy theory, its history. The rest of it is all kind of rubbish, and they've kind of just pretended they had some real evidence for this, but there really is no evidence for it. And the big implication is that all their nuclear physics is kind of just rubbish because of this fake energy they've drawn into the universe. And because they drew it into the universe, they had to draw implications of it. So they had to create new things to fit the model because their model has fake energy in it. Anyway, but you are so blatantly wrong. So I'm not blatantly wrong about the double slit experiment. So no, I'm not. And you're not counter-arguing any of the millions of points I've made. I mean, millions and millions. So, he says, and it's kind of embarrassing. Yeah, no, it isn't. It's embarrassing for you, and it's going to be more and more embarrassing for you in the future, because it's just clear that you're just a mouthpiece for religious jargon. Your preacher, your minister told you so, and you believed it like a silly dupe. None of your physicists can actually accurately describe what pattern the slit experiments produce. They have such an empty and thin understanding, and that is revealed because they make these insane errors. Talking about the center maxima and the straight line creating, both. It has to be the 0 point, and it's inside of 1 millimeter, the zero. But it has to be constructive. Yeah, inside of 1 millimeter, it has to be. Anyway. You clearly personally want it to be particle, so whatever, you can do your little projecting. It clearly, the universe has every indication of being just momentum, and that's all it runs on. And that momentum is in the form of something carrying it. So yeah, that's what it looks like to me. And it doesn't look like anything like spreading waves. There's none of that in the big universe, and in my opinion, there's none of it visible in the small universe, especially retracting invisible waves. Anyway, you trying to manipulate the experimental evidence. So no, you're the ones lying about it. You're overtly lying about it, and you're lying here, which is, if you're going to keep doing that, I'll just block your IP. You don't have any credible evidence to show anybody. You don't diagram anything. You don't show anything. You got nothing to defend you except saying the Pope says so. Haven't you ever seen the Shroud of Turin? I mean, it proves Jesus exists. That's all you're doing. You're just some religious kook, okay, with your UFO images. Showing up and telling me, see, there's a UFO. See? Well, yeah, it looks like a balloon, but it's a UFO. Which very, very clearly shows wave phenomena. So another big fat lie. It clearly doesn't. You can draw something that might look like waves, but if they mathematically don't work, then that's cheating. And that's all you've got is silly cheats. To fit, that is just painful. So he says, which very clearly shows wave phenomenon to fit. That is just painful. So he's saying I'm trying to manipulate evidence when clearly they have manipulated evidence. What the patterns that are produced are indisputable, frankly. There is enough people who have done single slit and double slit experiments that we know exactly what the patterns are. And you're the ones lying about them. I can show Richard Feynman not accurately describing the pattern. I can show Leonard Susskind not accurately describing the pattern. I can show Sean Carroll not accurately describing the pattern. Over and over and over again. So all the evidence points to you being the liars, not me. Okay. You are showing a blatant bias. You're doing that. Yes. And willingness to severely distort data to fit your perceived notions. So there's absolutely no evidence I've distorted a single fucking thing. So it's just an overt lie. And yeah, I don't think lying's a good thing. I think it makes you a scummy person when you have to lie to make your point. then you're not very logical and you don't have anything called integrity. Okay, you have absolutely no evidence I ever distorted any evidence ever, or ever distorted a view I ever showed in any video or anything like that. All right, you're being painfully dishonest, okay, and showing just how weak your argument is by resorting to this accusation you can't base it on any evidence. Zero evidence for your accusation. Okay, your theory will never get absolutely anywhere if it requires you to do this. No, I would argue that you're the people who are demonstrating that your science is insanely corrupt, and that even when you're caught cheating and thieving the evidence, you'll sit there and still deny, because your shroud of Turin is Jesus. And it's clear he rose right through the shroud, and that's why he burned his image into it, because he rose from the dead. You're the one that has shit evidence and a shit story. And you're the ones who can't let it go. And you'll resort to accusing other people of crimes, okay, to get away with your lies and your distortions and your perversions of the facts. You're a disgustingly shit human being. So let's go over the evidence that he'll never show, that he'll never diagram, okay, that he'll never make his story real with anything called an honest representation of the actual evidence. Well, that's an annoying amount of glare, I must say. Well, it's going to have to be close enough. All right, so there's 3 ways you can do the experiment that we'll talk about. Okay, you can have a single slit, you can have a single impediment, where the light can go through this side or this side, or you can have what's called the double slit, where the slit widths are real and the impediment width is real and all that kind of crap. And you get 2 of the same patterns when you use the single impediment, because essentially the math overtly says this. The math is overtly saying what's the distance between the surfaces. So if you do the double slit, it's the distance of the solid impediment, and in the single slit it's the distance of the opening. So clearly this doesn't have anything to do with a wave creation, does it? I mean, you don't think of this as the solid impediment's an opening and the wave goes through the opening, so that theory isn't going to work at all. So clearly what's relevant are the point sources, okay? The sources are the surfaces. That's why these 2 patterns are the same, is because the sources are the same in the 2. And the only thing that really changes is how much light actually gets to the surface. Obviously, in this case, you just have the opening, so the light in the middle goes through, so there's more, your spread is more likely to be in that range. And in this case, it's exactly the opposite. Less light in the center, not nearly as bright. But, the pattern's going to be the same. So there'll be very similar patterns. This one will be brighter, tend to be brighter in the center, and this one will be less bright in the center. But they're the same because the point sources are the same. And so it's again, you're still stuck with a 2-wave theory. There's no single slit experiment where the wave goes through like this and makes the pattern, an interference pattern. Can't happen. Single wave can't do that. And then you come up with some bullshit about diffraction or something, like there's little waves coming out of the sides here. Well, if you believe that's happening, then the wider you make the opening, the catch is your pattern gets bigger, not smaller. And then the fact is the wider I make it, right? I make this pattern wider, well then I make these little things smaller and I make them more numerous. All right, that's what I get as a consequence. I don't get this, if it was diffraction, I would end up with a big giant, this node thing, it gets bigger and bigger. Well, that doesn't happen. So it's defeated logically. It can't possibly happen the way you say it happens, because the bigger the slit, then the bigger the center maxima gets. And that doesn't happen. What happens when I make this slit wider and wider is as I get more and more little nodes, not less and less. So it's exactly the opposite of a diffraction theory, right? And clearly we know there's dozens of little nodes or bars. This isn't some little residual diffraction happening on periphery. It's a clearly strong pattern that's created. And then so in the double slit, this 2-wave thing, the Young 2-wave theory, okay, doesn't work. Because if I make 2 waves, I'm not going to get this complex pattern with 2 patterns superimposed. I don't get the envelope pattern. I can't draw the envelope pattern as the byproduct of just 2 waves. I have to have 4 waves. 4 waves centered in the same place that there are here, on the surfaces. 4 waves always originating on the surfaces. All right, and that gives me 4 distances. The distance of the slit, the distance of the impediment, the distance from the widest distance, and the distance from one slit edge to the other surface to the other surface. So there's 4 distances involved. Some of them don't matter depending on how the proportion of the opening to the other thing. But the fact is, as a general rule, the widest dimension makes the smallest nodes because there's the most path length differences. Obviously, the wider it is, the more lines I can draw. Where I have a wavelength of difference, the narrower the difference between the 2 point sources, the less lines I can draw. The less spots where there'll be an overlap in change in the phase. So the wider, the bigger the distance, the smaller the nodes. The smaller the distance, the bigger the nodes. And it completely works to just say, well, what's my smallest distance, whether it's the impediment or whether it's the slit, and then I find my biggest distance. And those 2 distances will dictate your pattern. That's the mathematics that works. That's the geometry. Again, the math is just geometry. It's just making a line and saying how long absolutely is that line. That'll tell you the answer just as well as just measuring this line, the x against this line. Just measure the 2, say how many path length differences do you have. And the catch is you just lay these lines flat and you can see it yourself right there that all of the path length differences are here on this line. This line will tell you, the flat lines will tell you exactly how many nodes are going to be, how many places it's going to be possible to have a wavelength of difference. And so that's the truth of the experiment. Your physicists don't even come close to touching upon this truth. They just show you this dopey picture, this shroud of Turin crap here. They show you this and say that's the experiment. We don't have to go any further. Yes, this could be a little better. And it's mathematically doesn't work, right? This distance clearly is a distance between 2 surfaces. What? This point and this point isn't ever in their math. They never go, what's the center of the opening from the center of the opening? Those would be the wave centers. How come they don't use that math? Oh, because it won't get the right answer. That's why. Because that's not where the waves are coming from, the centers of the openings. The waves aren't being little, this friendly little drawing of waves going through, water going through a slit. It's not like water. It's not like sound. It doesn't match. The evidence doesn't match that diagram. It doesn't mathematically work, and it doesn't geometrically work, and it doesn't logically work. It fails all those categories, and here you are obnoxiously calling me the liar? I mean, you've had more than 200 years to tell an accurate story, and you've told a lie from the beginning, and you just keep doubling down on the lie. That's evil. All right, get rid of that. So he says more, so we'll do the more part. All right, I just wish you would, Also, the wave math absolutely matches single double slit results. So that's just, it's a nonsense to say it. It overtly doesn't match. It absolutely doesn't match. I mean, the single opening, and the impediment prove the point. These 2 have matching patterns. You can't make a single wave go through the impediment. You have to make 2 waves somehow. It's obviously not the single wave theory. Okay, it's got to be 2 waves. So where are the 2 waves here? If you mathematically split the slit here and put your 2 centers there, guess what? That math won't work either. Okay, the only way you can do it is you have to put the sources right on the surface. And that's the other catch I wanted to describe. But the other way they cheat, okay, is this. It's a very simple way. They'll never describe this experiment mathematically, except in a circumstance where they've ruined the point sources. That is, they've made the slit opening so small that the 2 points are right next to each other. So there's no wavelength of difference. So they make the opening smaller than the wavelength of light, which means there's 0 places where there's constructive and destructive interference. There are none, because there's no wavelength of difference between this point and this. These 2 points are so close to each other that you might as well have them, you know, in the same place. You can't see that there's 2 points there. There's 2 points there, but you can't see them, right? Or else they make the single impediment so thin that there's also no difference between, obviously, that surface and that surface. So they take away another one of the sources, the point sources, turn one of the point sources into 0. So that's the only way they can ever make the math work, is to turn the 2-slit experiment into the single slit experiment. That's all they do. They make 2 of the point sources so close to each other that it's the same point, essentially, and therefore there's only 2 surfaces. They turn it back into a single slit experiment. That's the only way they can do it, is if that overt mathematical gimmick that doesn't have anything to do with anybody's visualization. When somebody says 2 slits, you're not imagining, oh, well, the slit is so tiny that it's thinner than the wavelength of light. Yeah, that's not what they're thinking. Or they don't think that the difference in distance between the 2 slits is so small that you can't even see it. It's a wire. No, then you're back to one slit. If you have a wire in between a single slit, then you basically just have a single slit experiment, because the wire becomes irrelevant, because the point sources on either side of the wire can't do anything meaningful, because they're not different places in the geometric universe. So anyway, so you're just talking. You're not proving or demonstrating. You don't have, these statements have 0 integrity. You're just saying my people are right. And they're blatantly right, and they're absolutely right. But you won't produce any evidence that they're right. And every clip I can play of them talking about it will demonstrate that they have got easy things wrong. Again, the Feynman example, where he thinks the 2 slits project to places here and here. Like this slit is projecting an object way over here, and this slit projects an object way over here. When no, they're a millimeter difference. Everything they project has to be inside of that 1 millimeter. When they're, oh, look, this path length is the same difference. Yeah, that's only 1 millimeter, okay? That's all. 1 millimeter on the screen, okay, is where they're constructively interfering. But as soon as I go a ½ millimeter away, I'm here now. And here, and this line, they start to move in the same direction. And obviously you can sort of understand that at this very tight range, these movements aren't going to create a path length of difference. And so this is going to be some form, you know, some level of constructive interference, and this side's going to be some level of constructive interference, and the 2 are going to merge and create a big giant double node. Again, they never explain why the center node here and here is twice as large. Twice as large. The envelope twice as large. So there's 6 or 7, I mean, there's always an odd number, so there's 5 in the center and only 3 on these outsides. They never explain any of that, because they're not paying any attention to the physical reality that the light is not casting shadows at angles. The slit experiment is shooting light in straight lines. This slit is open this way, and this slit is open this way. They don't spread out over here and create a node over here and a node over here. So many defects in their logic and in the way they've presented the evidence. And again, I have done it in so many videos. It's just outrageous that somebody would say this crap. It's just absolute crap. All right. The wave math absolutely matches. So it doesn't match. It always fails. Young's analysis is superficial. It's so trivial, and it's so wrong. You can't do the math from the wave centers being the center of the slit and ever get a right answer. It always produces a wrong answer. All right. When double slit results with diffraction and interference. So they're 2 different things, diffraction and interference. I played the Professor Lewin clip where he overtly says it's all the same thing. It's an interference pattern. Okay, diffraction is just a nonsense word. There's not 2 different concepts here. When you see pattern in the single slit, it's caused by the same thing that's causing the pattern in the double slit. So again, your MIT professors don't agree with your own assertions, for fuck's sake. And then you're telling me you are absolutely true, that you have absolute evidence of something, that the math absolute matches, when no, it doesn't. Your professors concede it doesn't. And the software has been created which can perfectly simulate these results. The software is created by the mathematics, idiot. You didn't produce the results by matching them to physical reality. I mean, it's a preposterous lie. Show the simulation and then show the reality. And show the two of them matching. And I'll demonstrate where if you use two-wave math in the double slit experiment, you will not get accurate results unless you have, again, surfaces that are less than the wavelength of light apart. That means hundreds of nanometers apart, which means hundreds of times smaller distances than the human hair. Liar. Okay, so and again a third comment. I just wish you would accept the experimental results. So again, I don't need to accept anything. Okay, you're the one that has to take on the burden of having something called integrity and recognize that your evidence does suck, that you haven't produced any, that you don't do any of this work, that you haven't done any analysis, you haven't actually measured anything, you haven't looked at the other experiments and measured what you see. You haven't done any of this work. You're just spouting crap because they told you so. That's all you've got. I've been told. That's your argument. That demonstrate blatant wave phenomenon. So again, more nonsense about anything being blatant here. Clearly, I can play the clip of Richard Feynman saying it's not waves. So another one of your major priests in your frickin' religion who overtly states to you it's not waves, okay? It's the wrong idea, okay? It don't work that way, he says. The machine don't work that way, the photo detector. All right? They don't spread everywhere. They don't do any of these things called waving, okay? Because as long as you continue to deny it, I'm not denying anything that's worthy of being accepted. You have a propaganda story, a UFO story, a Shroud of Turin story, a fossil story, and it's all a big sham. It's all based on no real connection, okay? So just like your notions of your magical energy, this is just a magical story that you've told that has nothing to do with reality. The connection between water waves and sound waves and light was never very strong. I could always just point to the single slit and say wave theory doesn't work. Wave theory doesn't work. Wave theory doesn't work. Because it doesn't. Sound waves going through one opening don't interfere. Okay, water waves going through one opening don't interfere. It doesn't happen. All right, so the connection was always weak. And it only had to do with one experiment in a certain way. You do one experiment a certain way, it looks like. All the rest of the time on the clock, it doesn't match. You're the one forcing a stopped clock, your little historical stopped clock to be, no, our stopped clock is the right clock. And the one that's moving isn't. Yeah, sure. Anyway. All right, because as long as you continue to deny it, I'm not denying anything that should be paid any attention to. Propaganda is deniable. Okay, and that's all you have. Little stories. Your theory will be dead in the water. Well, like I said, the future's going to bury you, frankly, on the pile of asshole. You're going to be one of the many zillions of assholes on this stupid fucking planet who have this arrogant, pontificating, silly notion in your head that you've done more work or that you deserve the truth or any of that crap when you haven't earned it, you didn't work to get it, your knowledge is superficial and trivial. Okay, you don't give a fuck about the truth. You just give a fuck about your fucking story. Okay, your little woo is completely dependent on you believing in this silly universe that somehow does magical things. You can't accept the deterministic, mechanical nature of reality, and so you're sitting here lying, okay, slandering other people to defend your fucking horse shit. And it's just plain shit stories. You're a little UFO kook. You might as well be a flat earther. You might as well be a flat universer. You're just a jackass trying to defend a little silly story. You want a grander adventure than the real universe provides. So you want to force the universe to match your silly delusional notions of interesting. Fuck you for it. You should do it at least honestly. Try to find some real evidence instead of lying about the evidence that exists. Try to be a flat earther UFO nut without being a dishonest scumbag. Without pointing to your fucking crop circles and say, see, there's proof. No, that's not proof of anything, shit for brain. You can get upset and say I'm an idiot. I know you're an idiot, and the fact is you're worse than an idiot because you're a dishonest piece of scum. You're a dishonest idiot. Far worse than just being an idiot. Okay? In a response video, but nothing will change this fact. Well, nothing's going to change the fact, yes, that you will. Again, you're the one, you're such a coward you can't even sign this crap you put on my fucking website. You're so fucking weak. You're so fucking dishonest. And so I shouldn't even pay any attention to it. But see, I'm letting you represent a few assholes out there who maybe are just too gullible, too silly to really recognize obvious things like that. Like, oh yeah, these aren't even signed comments. I mean, I shouldn't take them too seriously. Yeah. But fuck you. Yeah, that's it. So that's probably enough. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said. I mean, yeah, you're scum. You're lying scum. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think that covers it. Alright, so we can get rid of this. And, nice purple sky. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Alright, so till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. You're not going to persuade me with lies. I mean, it just isn't going to work. You have to persuade me with a piece of evidence, and you don't have any. You can't produce it. Again, you don't have a single source you can go to, some credible, knowledgeable source on the double slit experiment, because you don't have any. They all have just been told a silly story, and they all fell for it. And the story was never true. Again, the day Young drew his diagram, he was wrong. The fact was it didn't mathematically work. Light isn't behaving like two water waves. It's not fucking happening. It's not the truth. It's not fact-based. It's just propaganda. And it's just sad and pitiful that you all fall for it. That you're all just dupes for this bullshit. Yuck. Alright, so that's probably enough now. Yeah. So I guess I could just slide this out of here and say that be all, folks. Till the next time and such. So forth and whatnot. Yeah. I guess I'll put this on YouTube, so I guess I might as well mention in the comments or in the description. There'll be a list of the other videos I have done in recent days, or will do in future days, and such. So, till the next time, and such.